Hey everybody, this is Purple Update, the halftime show for Denver at Minnesota. I am your host, Joe Johnson, owner of PurplePTSD.com and its sister site, VikingsTerritory.com. I am also the host of the weekly Vikings podcast, The Morning Joes, which records every Wednesday around 9:30 or 10:30 in the morning, live, and then you can listen to it on the Big Heads Media Network, or Podcast Network, rather, or anywhere you find podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple, Google Podcasts, so on and so forth. I typically take a lot of notes and go into specifics each week during the halftime update, but I'm not going to do that today because I think the first half of this game is the really just a microcosm of things that we've seen the last couple seasons, but across the board in the Zimmer regime. I was really looking at some of the things I said in the pregame show and discussing those and kind of patting myself on the back, but I don't want to do that. That's kind of gross, and it's also pointless at this point. This game is basically the Buffalo Bills 2.0, same situation or same last name of the quarterback with the Allens. Here's the deal. And call this hyperbolic, and this may not age well. The Vikings may come out, shut them down on defense, a la the final three quarters of the Packers game. The offense may come through. They may win this game. But championship teams do not do this. They just don't. The Vikings are undefeated at home this season. They're playing a guy who has one start under his belt. They're playing a team that, for the most part, on offense has been bad to terrible. And my cats are going to knock over the background. But whatever, because that sums up my day. The Vikings are playing like crap. My new puppy chewed out the shoulder of my $150 Vikings hoodie. Everything's bad in Vikings land and in Joe Johnson land. But back to my point, championship level teams do not do this. They just don't. The Vikings, this will be the third, assuming they lose this game, the third backup quarterback that the Vikings have lost to this season. You don't see teams doing that. You don't see the Patriots doing that. All respect to Chad Greenway, who I love and who I consider to be, at least on the level of interactions here, a friend of the show. When he was on, it was after the Bears game, and he was really poo-pooing the idea that it's not the head coach's job, or they don't even have the ability to get the team ready for games. That these guys are grown men, they're millionaires, they're not college ball players, they're not high school ball players. It's up to them to get motivated for themselves, or team captains, or so on and so forth. I didn't play football outside of when I was younger. I was a hockey guy. I can't say that he's wrong and I'm right, but there's just a correlation between Zimmer. This team is not ready to play. They're just not. They look flat. They look bad. They're getting outplayed by a bad team. Now, on their defenses, and they have been. One of the three keys to this game, I said, is the defense has to come out and play with some heart, some intensity, some sort of not going through the motions. You think if Anthony Barr spurned the Jets to come back here, if Everson Griffin took a pay cut, that they really believed in what they were doing here. They thought they were so close to winning a championship. And for what? They just look bad. I mean, they're not playing the 2009 Vikings. They're not playing the 2007 Patriots. This isn't an amazing offense that they're going up against, and they're just getting beat. Assignments. The players are getting beat, but the coaches are also not coaching it the right way. I was so encouraged by. I had this theory this week, and I wrote an article about Kubiak, the quarterback whisperer that ended up on Bleacher Report. And I thought that, okay, Stefanski realized that perhaps he needed more of Kubiak's help, and that's what we've seen in these past X amount of games where this offense has exploded, right? You saw that last week. You saw it with Rudolph and the two touchdowns that he had. But it feels almost like the Chiefs game again in that, but worse, because why is Cousins standing in the fucking pocket? Roll him out. You're going against Von Miller, for Christ's sake. You have to get him out of the pocket. They're not doing that. I don't know what they saw. It's just, I feel like if I'm calling out things in my pregame based on it, what I read this week and 2 hours of prep this morning as me, look what I'm wearing. Like, how am I seeing these things and the Vikings aren't? And now seeing them and executing them are two completely different things. I understand that. But they're not, again, either they're getting too cute or they're not going to win this way on offense. Things aren't going to work, especially with Thielen not playing. You can't have Cousins standing in the pocket. Sure, he's 10 for 11, 11 for 12, but they're not moving the ball. There's no threat. They've been punting on every possession outside of that fumble. And you guys, I understand getting excited about how things like the Cowboys game, for example, but the defense has been non-existent. The secondary has been bad. There's been no pressure from the front, and that hasn't changed. They're to the point that they're just getting beat by this offense. Whether they're not ready to play, whether the game plan was wrong, whether or not they're not executing that game plan, I think it's all three. It's just bad. I'm going to look at some of your comments because I really have nothing else to say. I don't have any confidence in this team. I don't have any confidence in the coaching staff. I don't even want to call this a big game, but it is a big game because the NFC, we're the 6th wild card spot right now. We lose this game, then we have a bye. We go to Seattle. We're going to lose that game, obviously, in Seattle. You can't lose this game. You cannot. I mean, this isn't even a Bears without Trubisky situation, which at the time we didn't know Trubisky was. Some of us didn't. I did. But that seemed like a gift. Trubisky's gone. Chase Daniel. Ooh, we could sneak one in Chicago. We never do that. The Chiefs. Mahomes. Ooh. Oh, I mean, it sounds a lot like the Eagles situation in 2017. Nick Foles? We're going to go against the backup? I don't care if we're on the road. It's a backup quarterback. Brandon Trogdon had a comment. He said, "This is the lethargic Vikings team we've seen since losing in the championship game versus the Eagles. Where's the fight?" I would argue, I agree with your point. I would argue that it extends to the second half of the Saints game. I don't know. Like I said, you think if Barr was spurning more money in New York, that he and this defense would be. There's just no passion. There's no heart. There's no intensity. They don't need to be mean. They don't need to take helmets off and club other players, but they need to play like they actually care. The only reason Rhodes shows any passion is because I think he's subconsciously realizing that he just can't do it anymore, and it frustrates him. His body's not operating the way that he's accustomed to. He's only 29 years old, by the way. I saw a lot of people in our live chat saying that Zimmer doesn't have the guts to bench him. And maybe he does, maybe he doesn't, but it's not just a Rhodes issue at this point. This defense, God, thank you, Sendejo, for. I mean, this game very well could be 24-0 at this point. Again, it feels like the Bills game. It is so frustrating to get to this point for this team to invest everything, to give Zimmer carte blanche to build this defense, to say any pick you want, in lieu of maybe creating drafting some offensive linemen before the 4th round for half a decade, six years for after Khalil. And up until Brian O'Neill, I'm probably forgetting. Willie Beavers was the 4th round pick. The secondary has 3 first-round picks and a second-round pick on it. 3 of those 4 picks were made by Zimmer. We're maxed out on the salary cap. We've re-signed everybody. The core of this great defense is locked in until 2023. But what's the point? They never show, even when they're playing historically well with all these, 2 seasons ago when they had that 3rd down percentage. At least they showed up in games they were supposed to win, and they didn't show up in big games or primetime games, but they showed up in games like this. This is like, what pisses me off is this is the Bills game without the turnovers, early turnovers. Sure, Cousins had the fumble. Abdullah had the fumble. Those led to 3 points. The Bills game, you had those 2 fumbles, and then all of a sudden you were down. This game, it just isn't that. It's just stagnation. It's a lack of energy. You're at home. The crowd is completely out of it. Against this team, I mean, I called it. I said it wasn't really a trap game because their defense is still really good. I will stand by that. But it's the offense is beating them this badly. It is incredibly frustrating because, again, championship teams don't do this. It's too late in the season for this to be happening. What is going on back there? Yeah, I mean, Tang, thank you, man. I remember you. I really appreciate that you've been on a couple of these episodes with me. I hope you kind of like my righteous indignation. It's just, I feel like we're so heavily invested in Zimmer and the team he's built that it's very frustrating because the way that I show my sadness is anger, right? Not to get too personal, but I'm angry because I just, I in bits and in spurts, I've kind of said I don't see the point of cheering for this team in the long run because they're going to blow it if they make the playoffs because they just do things. I wrote an article about it 2 weeks ago, and I hope you guys can find it. Maybe I'll link it somehow in the post-game show or in the article with the show on Vikings territory and Purple PTSD. But essentially that there were 3 major issues with this team that can rear their heads at any given time. The defense and their lack of heart, mainly the secondary, but across the board. I mean, where's Danielle Hunter? Where's Everson Griffin? The coaches getting too cute, as I talked about in the pregame show, and out scheming or out thinking themselves, a la the 2017 NFC Championship game, the first 4 or 5 games of last season, and then Cousins imploding. I would argue 2 or 3 of those things are happening right now in this game. And so sure they can play with the Cowboys in Dallas, but there's just really no consistency. The offense has been carrying the defense this entire season. I don't want to hear anybody shitting on Cousins anymore, because to be honest, he carried the defense to start the season last year, and then he had no protection. He had no running game. Nobody would win in that circumstance. Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers would not win in that circumstance. Well, maybe Rodgers would because he's always had a bad line. And the offense is carrying the defense yet again. And I just thought that this could be a good game for them to a get right game for the defense because while it's a backup and that scares me because they play horrible against backups for whatever reason, at some point either they're going to get it together or they're not. And it's clearly trending towards the latter. And what does that make? I don't know. I don't know what to do with that information. I'm not one of those people who believes that firing Zimmer after the season means you're blowing up the entire team. When I wrote something about that last season when the defense seemed checked out on what Zimmer was doing, people said, why blow things up? You still have the entire roster. You have arguably the best roster in the entire NFL. You could keep George Edwards even. But there's something needs to change. Again, all respect to Greenway. He knows a million times more than I do, and that's understating it. But this team, maybe the coach doesn't need to get them up, but players in the NFL seem to be very symbolic, and they believe in something, and that belief can carry them a very long way. That's why when for example, like the Bears, the double doink, that can kill any momentum until the next season because you work that hard, you're that physical. The defense for the Bears last season scored so many points, almost unsustainably so, as we've seen this season, and it deflates them. I just don't see that belief that this defense has anymore. Zimmer did talk about that with the media during training camp. He said the defense was kind of going through the motions. They were complacent. Because they're not really fighting for their jobs the way that guys on offense were. They've been there a long time. You got 10 of 11 starters returning, with the 11th being a guy that was on the team for years and just went to the Seahawks. And that complacency might be it, or maybe they're just not buying what Zimmer is selling anymore, or maybe Zimmer is just reached his peak and what he does just doesn't work anymore. I mean, there's only a certain amount of shelf life for something. Like the Wildcat was a big deal because it confused Belichick in that game years ago, and then everyone did it, and then it kind of went away because everyone figured out how to stop it. I know Zimmer doesn't really say that he runs the double A gap blitz scheme anymore. He runs variations of it. He's always mutating things like a flu virus. But at this point, I just don't see a lot of evidence that he's this defensive mastermind that everyone says he is. He's gotten outclassed by every good to elite level offensive-minded coach. Andy Reid, Sean McVay, Doug Peterson, even Matt freaking Nagy, who doesn't really deserve that title. Granted, he was the coach of the year last year, but this is bad. This is bad. I mean, for any hopes that we had for the postseason, the Seahawks would not do this. Maybe the Saints would. The 49ers would not. The Packers wouldn't even do it. It's typical Vikings. And again, they can come out and they can win. They should still be able to beat this team. They should be able to shut them down, at least not allow them to score any more points or very many more points. But it's going to be very, very hard for them actually to win this game against this defense. They have a great, I think they're fourth in the league against the pass, which is why they haven't, Zimmer or Cousins is 10 for 11, but has a handful of yards. Oh, the game's back on? Sorry, I just blacked out. Where am I? Whose house is this? All right, well, looks like we scored a touchdown, so hooray. I'm just going to delete what I just said. No, let's chat after the game, guys. Hopefully we can win this game, but I'm clearly not happy. I'm going to go eat some pizza and take some SSRIs. Skull?